For some of you, it's very early morning, for others, rather late night already. Therefore, both organizations express the respect and gratitude for being with us today. More than 100 members of our organization signed up for this webinar, underlying the crucial need for this project and this subject. Exactly 7 weeks ago, both TIACA and pharma.io, with the support of other international organizations, started working on a project that is named Sunrays. Today, we are inviting you for a first of a series of 2 webinars to explain and open the project to all our members in creating guidelines in handling storage and transport of COVID-19 vaccines once they are available in the future. So welcome to the Sunrays project webinar. Before we start, a few practicalities. Some practicalities are quite important, so please listen carefully. The session will be recorded for quality reasons and in order to have all information available for further use and publication. Therefore, we must underline that no commercial sensitive information can be disclosed at any time. In case of doing so, you will be asked to leave the webinar immediately and the webinar might be stopped. What is the agenda for today? So after the short start that I just give, I will give the word to Emir Penada, Manager Aviation, Trade and Logistics of the Miami International Airport and Board of Directors of TIACA. He will be followed by Bert Elsen, the project manager of this Sunrays project, on a presentation on what we have gathered on information. And after that, we will open what we would call an opinion sharing session and questions and answers, where we both will, of course, answer the questions you have. And on the other hand, also listen to some of the opinions you might have during and listening to what we have already gathered together. So being here, it's time to start. We have limited time. We would respect the time. So welcome again, all of you. And I'm very honored to give now the word to Emir Penada to start the session. Please, Emir.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Really glad to be with you here this morning from Miami and with all of you from around the world. Today, the world finds itself at unprecedented levels of urgencies, expectations, and uncertainties. Pharmaceutical manufacturers race to develop COVID-19 vaccines. More than 100 companies are working on this right now. The world was waiting on them like they were waiting for the PPEs earlier during the year. But the logistics behind PPEs was quite challenging. As we all know, there was product scarcity, capacity shortages, border closures, diplomatic tensions, theft, etc. All this caused quite a ruckus in the transportation of the PPEs. As vaccines are not yet approved, logistics industry is blind to affecting the decision-making process and the levels of preparedness. Uncertainty exists in many levels and areas: production timelines, volumes, trade lanes, transportation, storage requirements, product specifications, travel restrictions, etc. All of this is affecting how we can properly distribute the vaccines that we're all expecting to do so. So in logistics, who will win at gambling? Manufacturers and research institutes are under extreme scrutiny. Pressure from health authorities, politicians, media, the general public, and our extreme competitive environment is also causing a tsunami of information changing daily. Trust is a problem. We're living in an era of fake news. Dealing with highly confidential and commercially sensitive information is causing a lot of stress. Decision-making process in logistics sectors looks like a risky gamble at this point. But through investment in skills, cold chain, security equipment, innovation, and packaging and others, we are going to make a difference. So how do we decide what and where with no solid market information and a challenging economic environment? Well, this was done through an effort, as Frank earlier said, of a joint initiative with TIACA, the International Air Cargo Association, and pharma.era, with the focus on creating transparency between pharma shippers and air cargo professionals, and with the delivery of guidelines for the air freight industry to get ready to handle and store, transport, and deliver future COVID-19 vaccines. A joint task force was created made up of the following companies: Changi Airport, Turkish Airlines, Flexport, Miami International Airport, Nutra Air Partners, SATS, Edmonton International Airport, and Brussels Airport, all working together in an effort to come up with the recommendations. The joint effort has been working and providing a shining light on the COVID-19 vaccines transport requirements and air freight readiness. This was done by collective insight, research, compilation of information available on public domain, one-on-one interviews with vaccine manufacturers, industry surveys to collect insights from air freight, something that most of you answered that are on this call. We had weekly engagement and vaccine manufacturing calls, all providing value through analysis and deep dive investigation on specific areas, expertise, guidelines and recommendations, and industry mobilization and collaboration for greater reach and impact. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Bert Elson from Forward Advice for the complete analysis and today's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Emir, for this introduction. As we mentioned before, we first started with engaging an insight from the pharma industry. How we did this? We did this through, first of all, to start with pharma companies that were linked to the membership of pharma.io, expanding with other pharmaceutical companies that were having phase 3 or phase 2 vaccines ready, expanded it afterwards with other pharmaceutical companies that were in running to deliver the COVID-19 vaccine. We have done this through the one-on-one interviews, as mentioned by Emir, with a questionnaire where we would like to have an insight information on the development of the vaccine, but we also did it by research, searching for information available on public domain like internet and like media. First, we would like to give you a glance on the development of a vaccine. This traditional route to a vaccine development takes 6 until 18 years. If we see from the red arrow the phase 1 until it brings into the market, it takes 4 to 8 years. It is a known fact that now with the COVID, it has been expedited from the phase 1 because the base of the vaccine was already existing. They start from phase 1 until the market positioning in a certain circle of 12 months, where we try to combine all kinds of phase 1 and 2 together with phase 3 and a post-license together. This is giving a complex scenario for themselves as a pharmaceutical company, but also to link it with logistics. Until today, not a lot is known and still a lot is unclear. Of the 3 vaccines that have advanced to phase 3 trials, 2 of them, one made by Moderna and the National Institute of Health, and the other by Pfizer BioNTech, need to be kept at near constant deep freeze temperature. They are made with general materials. Pfizer expected the vaccine even needs to be stored as low as -80 Celsius, while Moderna need to keep it at -20. Another leading vaccine candidate being developed by AstraZeneca and the Oxford Institute must not be kept frozen, but they kept frozen. J&J will also a vaccine which needs to be kept cool. We have here mentioned a source, WHO. A lot of other sources are also available that mentioning other information, but also other numbers. Another challenge what can be displayed or what can be not mentioned here is the vaccines which needs 2 doses. It means after a first dose, there is an average between 12 and 20 days before you need the second dose. What gives us another challenge to have the supply required on time at the patient site. Other articles and information on mentioning terms like limited production or clinical trial phase 3, what is sometimes misleading and can be interpreted that vaccines are manufactured already for a big quantities, which is not the case. The list that is displayed is on the WHO site available and is a latest list published on the 28th of September. Another challenge, what has been sought before, is dry ice. We need a transport that can carry dry ice. For example, a box type X displayed here on our slide need 22 until 32 kilos of dry ice to remain inside the temperature of -17 Celsius degrees during 136 hours. But it depends, of course, on the airline and the type of aircraft. There are limitations to carry dry ice on board of an aircraft. In the slide, we mentioned a specific restriction table from one of our members. Other examples, like, for example, an Anatov Type 124, has no limitations on carrying dry ice. If we look to information we have identified on the next, we see that minimum order on the internet, we see minimum order quantities, for example, of 1,000 doses, which we can assume in one box. If you know that a certain country have purchased with the start of implementation of 400 million doses, how many boxes we need? And if you know the number of boxes, how many dry ice is needed? We have then the next question coming up is, if the country that will produce and manufacture this, do they have enough dry ice supply chain or capabilities to fill up the boxes? What if we need to refill? Can it be allowed? Is it be allowed? Can it be taking place? Other information that we have received is that almost every box of this cold chain, and due to high sensitivity and short transport lead times, will be monitored by a sensor. A sensor means it carries lithium batteries. Again, a -70 box in temperature Celsius inside means, for example, that it needs to be transported on an outside temperature of 50-25 degrees Celsius. It has a limited time of 136 hours to reach the destination and before the temperature inside increasing. We need a service that can guarantee this transit time, including all the steps like security checks and even customs. We have identified some potential manufacturing sites, which has already having a big chance to start production of the vaccine. These are all a few ones. But it gives us already an idea on where possible trade lanes can start from there to even other regions, countries. But we have to mention again, a lot is still not known. We cannot start to identify the manufacturings at this moment. A vaccine that is deep frozen and has a short shipping time needs to be provided to the patient in an equipped environment which can open a box of -70 or -20 degrees Celsius. This will be not happening, we assume, at a regular pharmacist. It needs special environment. This will have, of course, an impact on the distribution network and/or local regional supply. All this causes a lot of issues. And of course, not to mention a lot of challenges. We need more information. As a summary, we have bundled here the shipper's requirements. What is caught by our attention? Speed. As mentioned before, we have limited time or identified time where we need to deliver to the patient. An express service came up, security, customs needs to be aligned to have no delays. Security, this vaccine has been developed in a short period, but gives us the chance that the product is not serialized or is not known, so as this potential combat theft or counterfeited. Reliability, we need guarantees on delivery times. We need a guaranteed trade lane with a green lane where we can ensure the transit times. And transparency. Information on existing airfreight capacity, lead times for each lane needs to be known. Real-time or near real-time monitoring is necessary. Reliable information on capabilities of logistics providers, including each cargo facilities, is a need what the shippers need upfront to identify potential trade lanes. Knowing this information, we can look into our industry and see where are we at this moment. We have done this through a survey, which we have run between 8 and 20 of September, which most of you have completed it online. We can here see that 181 participants, almost equally spread on the stakeholders, has provided their feedback. The objective was to have a better understanding on the current readiness level in the airfreight supply chain for further COVID-19 vaccines. The feedback on the survey is that we see that the readiness or the preparedness was just over the half. With still a remark that 12% is mentioning they're feeling unprepared, but we see also that 28% feel well prepared. We now ask the same question, but we link it to the engagement with potential manufacturers or others like distributions for the vaccine. And there we noticed that still 5.9% of the participants has not reached out to one of those manufacturers or distributors. But 7.67% already did. And this gives directly a link with feeling themselves prepared because they have already first information on hand and they took already some initiatives. We have almost the same results for companies in the air industry who are working with activities linked, for example, to clinical trial. They have information available on processes, infrastructure, on handling those types of shipments. The only questions we have to ask is, are they ready to handle this shipment type of shipments with a volume equal to 10 times or 20 times more? To summarize this on the readiness, we see more than 50% is feeling themselves prepared, and companies with a link of manufacturers that may be going to produce the vaccine or involved in clinical trials have an advantage on knowledge, environmental, and processes. A number of companies has also put a dedicated team or a task force in place to coordinate this in their company. And they are working on specific areas like packaging, last mile delivery, or expanding their capacity and network with partners. They are, for example, certified by CIV Pharma. Another conclusion that's out of the survey is the link with the different stakeholders in our industry. We see that solution providers and freight forwarders are feeling well prepared because they are talking with the industry and having first-hand information, what is logic. But what is also coming out of this survey is that the information is not equally shared. Shared to, for example, airports or ground handlers, who has less of a direct contact and information available related to the COVID-19. They are not feeling prepared because they are not knowing what will come. Is it not fair to say that they are also important, since they will handle the goods on the level of ground handling or airports? They need also to prepare staff and also procedures. And maybe they need also investments in infrastructure. If the industry needs to be ready, this means everybody in the chain needs to be ready. Another question on the survey was the top concerns. The biggest concern overall stays, of course, the temperature excursion. Due to the known reason, we are talking here about time and temperature sensitive products, which we need to guarantee on the product integrity, linked of course with the temperature. Else it has an impact on the patient. Our challenge in the industry is also having a full supported lane that covers these elements. Second top concern is the challenge of lack of adequate infrastructure. But here we have to mention that this can also cause by not having all the information of all the stakeholders or companies has the correct information on what to foresee. Third concern is on transparency, visibility regarding the supply of the vaccine. It is a delicate shipment with a high focus during transportation, which is requiring a good visibility, but not limited to milestones only. We need live information on temperature conditions, location, and environmental conditions like damage and or other specifications. Topics like availabilities, capacity, lead times are following as a next, but again, we need to think in regards of a complete lane. Means the departure and the arrival location, which is close by the patient due to the shipping limitation of time, needs to be aligned. The last one, the other concerns that were being noted during our surveys are cost, security, and end-to-end connectivity. They are being added separately by the participants because we have only limited us to 6 questions on the survey. Interesting to mention is the response on putting in place additional or premium services. 49% will implement, and even 42% is made implementing services, what is giving the idea that a lot of companies will give a focus specifically on supplying and organizing themselves for vaccine. We need to understand a couple of things on this result. Again, freight forwarders and solution providers are in direct contact with potential vaccine manufacturers or others to gain information which result in getting themselves ready. Based on the information, the companies have make decisions. If not available, they are maybe looking into specific services or handling. The current situation we have at this moment in the air industry, meaning less passenger flights, but more cargo flights, is also a result in changing focus of certain companies. Companies who already recently had some challenges. Maybe they did already some investment just before the COVID-19 and need now dedication and need now more flexibility to achieve this challenge, what's coming up. The previous comments with the previous slide is actually the same for this slide. It's a given that companies that are already at challenging times not going to make changes if not having a business plan or a need to do so. The remark here is that the big providers who are working on this supply are making the changes on people, process and infrastructure. You read this in the media. But they need alternatives. They cannot handle it by themselves. The volume is just too big. An important element is also on information sharing, as we already mentioned a couple of times. In our survey, we noticed that there is data available to provide, also live, but limited to shipments, locations, and/or temperature. A lot of data in some areas are only available after request. Imagine you have a product -70°C or -20°C with a shipping time of 136 hours, where the government, authorities, pharma companies, and on top of all, media is focused on. It cannot be that the product has no right integrity or quality when injecting into a patient. How we know that nothing went wrong? How pharma companies going to evaluate a dose can be used? They need information. Yes, they have internal information, but they need support in case there's something was wrong. We don't have any window of days here, but only hours to respond and to act. This means a lot of visibility provided, mainly by tracking devices, in addition of existing or new. Therefore, airlines recommend shippers and forwarders to use airlines' own trackers or approved devices. If not, make sure you have upfront an approval before using it in the air industry. If we're going or reviewing the feedback on the facilities, we noticed that already a lot of capabilities is available. We see 50-25, 2.8, even -20, which gives us a good trust in the industry and the facilities and the capabilities. Maybe some questions that I can ask. Can we support a full lane with all the relevant required capabilities, meaning on the departure location and on the arrival location? Is there information on capabilities available? If a shipper needs to define the departure and the arrival, do they have that level of information available? If we have all capabilities available, are we ready? And are we ready to handle what kind of volume, how many? Again, because not having all information available on product specification or manufacturing location or country specifics, will this be the main focus for our next steps in this project, but also for the industry to act upon too. As mentioned on all of the most slides, it not mentioned again, we need to have a certain information. It is the biggest challenge to obtain the information relevant for shipping the COVID-19 vaccine. All of the topics mentioned on this slide coming out of the industry survey and has an impact on the delivering the correct and the good service. We can conclude to say that there is information out there, but very confidential or available for only limited audience. A need for a clear guideline or requirement is needed to be prepared and the industry to prepare on one of the biggest challenges, providing a service on the largest scale. delivering a sensitive vaccine all over the world to each of us, to the patient, to the peoples, to the patient, and this in a correct and good condition. A call to bring it up to the next level, sharing more information, sharing from the pharma industry to the air industry, and helping both industry to be ready and to perform. By this, I give the word back to you, Frank, for the interactive discussion.
Thank you very much, Bert, for your for the sharing of the information we have gathered until today from the questionnaires we have been sharing in both memberships from TIACA and Pharma. Thank you very much. What I've seen during the Q&A active session in the chat box, there are a few concerns that come up, and I will just try to highlight them. One of the biggest concerns, again, is of course raised in relation to air freight capacity. We know today that we are not fully on air freight capacity, that the belly space on passenger airlines is highly compromised. Still, against all odds, we see that we are not full under control again out of the situation. So that's one of the major elements that is raised in the chat box. Another one is what type of direct investment should ground handlers look at if tomorrow they need to look into handling these type of vaccines? And thirdly, is there absolutely now a need for investment in specific materials that will control temperature on the most critical part of the supply chain from and to the aircraft on the ramp handling? So I would say, let's start first on the air freight capacity. I would like to give the word to either Emir as representing TIACA on this one, or to JC representing Pharma. What do you think?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for that question. And yes, that continues to be one of the largest or biggest challenges faced right now, is that lack of capacity from the belly carriers from around the world. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge as airlines and markets around the world begin to open up. That challenge would start to diminish, but currently it does present a level of unprecedented lack of capacity globally. I don't believe today that the air cargo industry, particularly cargo freighter capacity, is going to be enough to transport the level of vaccines required to vaccinate or to distribute around the world. So it's going to be a collaborative effort between the supply chain, the airlines, and the governments working out there to try to meet that capacity level or lack of that capacity level. And that can only be accomplished, I think, when the airlines start to, to integrate service again. But let's be frank, the networks of the future or the near future are not going to be the networks that we knew before COVID-19. We're not going to have the level of service we had before. So the challenge will continue there for quite a while, and it's going to have to be made up, I think, by the cargo carriers, freighter operations, airlines that will carry passenger airlines that will carry cargo on their flights, and possibly government support, maybe from the military in some nations. And please, I welcome any other comments on what the belief is out there from the audience attending this webinar now.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Emir.
if I may.
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
JC.
thanks, Frank and Emir. I mean, if I may just add on to Emir's comments. If you look at the number of freighter aircraft today, there's a definite number of freighter. So in order to adequately transport the COVID-19 vaccines, I think certainly we need to activate passenger aircraft that is being grounded right now. I think IATA has also forecast that in terms of travel recovery, it won't happen to pre-COVID level that fast until about 2 years later. So we still have passenger aircraft that is on the ground right now that we can actually modify or redeploy them as PACC flights, or what we call passenger aircraft carrying cargo only flights. But then again, we also understand and we're also mindful that are limitations to these PACC flights. I'm doubtful that, you know, if dry ice can be carried in the main cabin of passenger aircraft, even in the belly hold, I think there's also limitation to the amount of dry ice. So I would say that there is still a lot of uncertainty and challenges that we need the industry to work very closely together, and even with the authorities as well.
Thank you very much, JC, for the add-on on this question. Bert, a remark that came into the group and a question to you. Of course, we know all that the production and the manufacturing of a vaccine is a quite multidisciplinary process and a quite complex process to finally end with having the little syringe with the needle ready to be injected into a patient. So how do you see, do you see any problems rising right now in relation to bringing all the different pieces together at a certain point? This means manufacturing a vaccine is one thing, but then you need syringes, needles, fillers, smaller packaging conditions. Is there any problem seen at this moment?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Frank. In the interviews that I had with the pharmaceutical shippers, at this moment they say they don't have that challenge currently. They have enough foreseen based on the information that they already have. Not all details are known, so those companies cannot be prepared, but some they are preparing like a regular vaccin. I mentioned here GSK or other ones like J&J. They have vaccines in their program already running. They are used to this. It is also a used comment like 2 to 8. For them, it's not specifically. Their supply chain is arranged on that one. For other ones, it's getting more challenging since they have now a specific type. But for them, not all information is on hand. So it can be there coming a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much, Bert. Another concern or another remark that is raised in the group, if I read through the chat box, is okay, what type of immediate actions can be taken in order to maintain these extreme temperatures? Dry ice was already raised as such. The question in the group is, okay, should we now start investing in active or non-active but protective equipments that transport the vaccine from the conditioned warehouse to the aircraft and back? So the question there is perhaps both to the airline and air cargo operators, so JC and Emir, but also perhaps to you, Bert, because you probably already noticed that there is some evolution as well into that.
Yeah, maybe I can kick the ball rolling. Of course, cold chain infrastructure is important, but I just want to emphasize that the processes and SOP are also equally important. I think from the survey, what we have also understand that some of the stakeholders are already prepared to launch new premium services, such as express services, priority services, expedited clearance, and some of the stakeholders are also talking to their local customs in order to forge expedited custom clearance. So I guess expeditious services is also critical. In addition, I think visibility is also a very important factor for us to note. The vaccines producers would need real-time end-to-end visibility, and that can only be achieved through industry collaboration. And I think each of us, each node of the supply chain needs to look at our digital infrastructure to see how we can give the kind of visibility that vaccines producers require.
Okay, thank you very much, JC. Bert, from your side, any addition on this one?
I think JC absolutely mentioned it correctly. On this side of the pharmaceutical information I collected it, again, some are used to this already. 2 to 8. Certain elements are already in place. What is not guaranteeing that there will be issues. Some are already transporting in, for example, active containers. We know that when there is a flu or the preparedness to ship the flu vaccines out is challenging, of course, directly on active containers availability. So imagine that there now will be coming a product on top that will be need shipped globally. This gives certain challenges. But now the industry knows this upfront, so they are looking in alternatives. So the alternatives needs to be validated. They need to be approved inside internally, so they not can just start with a complete new equipment or a new solutioning. It needs to be already approved upfront, and that means a process of months and years. They don't have that time, so they will go to used systems, what has been validated internally already.
Thank you, Bert. There is a bit more questions or remarks around when we name this like white glove services or express services. So coming on that point, I see a few remarks in the chat box saying, okay, is there now an enrollment with the integrators that they do the last mile deliveries? Have there already been action taken is one of the remarks we see. The other one is saying, okay, you can request for premium or express services, but the handling stays the same. So how can the handlers in one way or another align with the request of express services towards other way airlines or freight forwarders? So perhaps this is again a question towards especially the air cargo operator. So Emir, if you would jump in here to give a remark on that one.
Sure. Obviously, the integrators are in a probably a good position or a better position than most, because obviously they control the entire supply chain end to end, particularly the last mile. That doesn't mean there isn't opportunities, I think, for others. There's no way the integrated carriers, the DHLs, the UPS, the FedExes of the world are going to be able to handle the enormous volumes that are going to be present when the vaccine becomes available. I think, again, going to JC's point of collaboration across the supply chain, it's really going to be the only way that we're going to be able to meet the challenge ahead for this crisis. The integrated carriers, UPS has already invested quite a lot in freezers, and both here in Louisville at their hub, and in Europe, in Amsterdam. We see investment by FedEx and DHL as well. And investment, I think, will be required from others if you want to play in the space in the future. But it's really, I think, a call to collaboration between all of the stakeholders in the supply chain to make sure that we meet this challenge ahead.
Thank you very much, Emir. Anything to add on from your side, JC, on this, or Bert from your side?
I think I agree totally with Emir. I think there's a lot of discussion that the integrators would be the preferred carrier, but while they have very extensive fleet, again they have a limited number of aircraft. So I believe that they will also forge partnership with other airlines, especially regional carriers, where their network might not be that strong.
Thank you very much. We have said already a couple of times, collaboration, that's the way out. And I think collaborative initiatives, what is actually a potential secret to success. This is a global crisis in which the globe expect collaboration to solve it. A couple of remarks towards the speakers. Have we already reached out hands to organizations like the United Nations, WHO, other global organizations that also look at this big problem? So question again to you, perhaps Emir, or to Bert and JC.
Yes, we have been we've had initial contact with some of the organizations mentioned, WHO, Dhabi, COVAX, IATA. We are in preliminary talks with IATA to collaborate further moving forward. So the easy answer is we have reached out to certain organizations on the global stage, but not all of them, of course.
That actually aligns with the question that comes in, because it's only not sitting with certain organizations, but we have to join efforts. Do we have any information when it comes down to customs regulations or special codes on airway bills, that we know that once we are handling a COVID-19 vaccine or shipment, that a couple of alarm bells will go off, and that we know that we have to reach out to this SOP decided white glove service? JC, perhaps for you.
I don't think IATA has announced a special handling code for COVID-19 and vaccines. So we are in the midst of touching base with them to discuss on this matter in terms of COVID-19 transportation. In terms of customs, I believe that it's also important that each of the local air cargo community to start engaging the local customs authorities to create expedited lanes and expedited clearance. I mean, just take for instance, several days ago, I think Schiphol Airport and Air Cargo Netherlands have also announced that they have formed a task group, not only amongst the air cargo stakeholders themselves, but also with the government authorities such as the customs. So I think that this is a very good effort where we should not just collaborate amongst ourselves, but we should also involve the relevant government authorities in the discussion.
Thank you very much, JC. From your side, Bert, have you any information on that when it comes down to booking of such services from out of the viewpoint of the pharma shipper?
Yeah, so there again, we come to the point that for companies where like GSK or Pfizer or J&J that are common with sending vaccines, they have installed themselves already. They have services related to that. They are only looking into increasing their current services with premiums or with extra visibility. And that's an important one, the visibility, as mentioned in my slides. They don't have any time to get the releases done with weeks afterwards. It needs to be done immediately. So those things are more primarily for them. On the other side, they don't have all information available at this moment, for example, to have the authorities aligned, because they don't have the content of all products or all the things that will be registered or will be filed at FDA or other authorities. And that needs to be done first to have all those specs known, which will be brought to the customer, or to the customs or to the other countries. And that needs to be aligned.
Okay, thank you, Bert. Of course, one of the more sensitive thoughts that we have here, we are now focusing very much on getting ready for the vaccines and looking at different investments. One of the remarks we get in the chat box is, okay, if we need to invest a lot, this is a short-term investment for perhaps 6 months to a year max. So what are we going to do afterwards if vaccines are starting to go more by different other transport modes? It's more a concern. So how do we see this? Have we had any feedback on that? Perhaps for you, Amir.
Thank you for that question. Kind of difficult to answer. I mean, I think if you invest today for COVID-19, you'll be in a much better position for the future. I don't think this is going to be the last time the world is affected by some type of pandemic. And also the pharma industry is something that is actually quite lucrative for the air industry. So I think if the investment is the right type of investment with the long-term desire to be in this type of business, I think it's going to be worthwhile. But of course, that has to be evaluated and make sure that it's aligned with your planning and long-term business model. But I don't think an investment in the pharma industry is a bad investment. I think this is something that if done right, there's definitely going to be opportunities for the future.
Okay, thank you, Amir. Bert, to you, perhaps another question. We are about 8 minutes from closing off the webinar, so we have space for, like, let us say 2-3 more questions. One question to you, Bert. Of course, we were already flying a lot of pharmaceuticals before suddenly COVID rolled over the world, and on top nailed down all the capacity we had in the air. What are the concerns of pharma shippers for all the other products they still need to fly and to get ready for the COVID vaccine? Did you got anything back from that, talking to them?
A matter of fact, yes. We had a chat. Bringing this vaccine into the industry and to the supply is, of course, challenging. But at a certain moment next year, there will be a combination, what I mentioned earlier, for example, with the flu vaccine. So it is also the same requirements. So they had already some challenges before to send the flu vaccine in that amount. And now on top of it, we will probably somewhere in the mid or in the end of the vaccine of the COVID treatment or supply. So that will be a combination of both vaccines. And that can also have another interesting part on capabilities, capacity for active containers, but also on handling aspects. So yes, but again, main focus is on the launching of the COVID. They don't think about next stages further on.
Okay, so combi vaccines, like there are already a couple of out there, will be probably one of the strategic views of pharma shippers looking at it. Okay, thank you very much. I think we're about to end the webinar, and before we end, I want really to hand over again to Emir, just to give us a quick wrap up, next steps, and where are we heading with the project before we closing off.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the questions and all the insightful conversation we've had thus far. So we are going to be moving and announcing the next steps. And this will continuously be monitoring of vaccine development and open dialogue with the manufacturing is one of the things that we will continue with, along with performing in-depth analysis and collection of insights from pharma and air freight industry stakeholders. Produce a status report on air freight readiness for the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. That is one of our main goals, the white paper. Produce a set of guidelines, which will be in their recommendations, and call for action from the pharma shippers, air freight industry, and policymakers around the world. And finally, educate the industry through white paper, webinars, and presentations in the future, something that we will continue with this effort like today with webinars and presentations to our members and to the supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emir, for closing this webinar. Thank you very much, JC, for being part of the panel and discussing together with all of us. Thank you, Bert, for sharing the first insights in what we have been doing within the Sunrays project. And of course, thank all to the back office support from both organizations, TIACA and pharma.io, for supporting us and bringing this together. Before we close off this webinar, I would say thank you all to have been part of this first of the two webinars on the COVID-19 vaccine readiness of our industry called Sunrays. We are delighted we had so much interest and feedback during this first webinar. Both TIACA and pharma.io keep on collaborating strongly to provide the guidelines we were working on today. We hope you enjoyed this session. Tomorrow, same time, this means Central European time, 2 p.m. we will have our second webinar with the same program. We wish you all a beautiful day, and we just want you all to keep safe. Thank you very much, and we would like to say goodbye.
Goodbye, Ru.